Hello, 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 friends, and welcome to another book review. This time we're talking about something a little different. We're going to be talking about Peter by Kate Walker. It's different. Yeah, I'll go into that once we get to the story overview and some of the tropes and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting read, and I had fun with it. So let's go through the synopsis and characters like we normally go through. For those of you who are new, we will be touching on the story. There's, I would say, not much to be spoiled in this book. It's fairly short. It's like 230 pages, and there's not a lot that happens, but we'll get into it. So let's start with the characters before I get too much into my own head about this. So we're introduced to Peter Dawson. He is kind of our main character. He's the one taking us through his life and summer vacation, kind of. He's a teenager. He's 15. He likes motorbikes, dirt bikes, I might call them, and photography. He likes taking photos. He's got an old school dark room that he and his father set up, and all that kind of stuff. He's like into old school vintage photography. He lives with his mother, who's divorced, and his brother, who's older, and he does not like him or his father very much. He doesn't quite fit in with his biker group friends. As a teen. I mean, they're all teenagers, but like he doesn't fit in. He's a little out on the outskirts, but he does like hanging out with them, and he does enjoy the camaraderie that they have about talking about bikes. He just wishes that they weren't, kind of fucking up the backfields specifically, as that's kind of a sore spot for him and his family, or specifically his mother. And about a third through the book, we meet David Rutherford. He's in his 20s. He's friends with Vince, Peter's older brother, and he's openly gay. And Peter makes a couple of comments on that, like, you're friends with a gay guy? And it's very, like kind of like questioning homophobia, if you will. It's not like outright, what? He's gay? Like, that's bad. It's more like, are you sure you should do that? Like, he doesn't come on to you. It's very like early teen homophobia, like I said. He is studying to be an engineer, and he's tinkering with his car. Later throughout, he's also tearing apart a lawnmower just for kicks, trying to piece things together, learn how things work and stuff like that. We get a gaggle of other characters, but some of them I'll just touch on real quick. It's Bob Dawson, the divorced father and barely in his kid's life. Vince Dawson, the older brother and a big jerk. Lynn Dawson, the mother working as a nurse. She's kind of a little overbearing. Mrs. Binslow, the housekeeper. Peter doesn't like her. And then some other teens. We have Sophie, Gloria, and Tony. The four of them kind of go on a couple of dates, if you will, and they go into Peter's darkroom where things kind of get out of hand. Then we have some random kids who Peter hangs out with, like riding bikes and stuff, but there's too many to list, and also I'm probably not going to list them all because I think I would have missed one. But there's like, a bunch of kids, like one's called Rat, one's called Alice, stuff like that. So the overview is Peter enjoys riding his dirt bike, and one morning he nearly falls kind of off a big hill, if you will. He biffs it kind of, and he's when he's going up a big hill. He doesn't get on with the group too well, but he does like hanging out with them. But his bike's obviously not doing too well because it can't make it up the hill, so he's trying to figure out like how to fix it. He's not that mechanically inclined, if you will. And then kind of through in the beginning, Vince is trying to get his mother to let him borrow the car, to which she eventually agrees if he does the shopping, as she was going to go out to do the shopping. And then Peter's made to tag along, and the pair to go to David, since that's why Vince wants the car, to help the guy get some car parts. And they kind of meet. It's an interesting kind of conversation. Peter doesn't realize first that David's gay, and then when he does, he's like kind of reevaluating that whole conversation and stuff like that, because the pair of them kind of hang out. They leave Vince to go do the shopping. He leaves Vince to go get the car part or something, and they hang out. They're chumming it up. They're being friends. And then David mentions that he does want to get some pictures taken of his car once he fixes it up, and in exchange he offers to take a look at Peter's bike and kind of fix it up, and the pair begin a friendship from there. And it's quite sweet. Not in a romantic way, just in a more of like a friendship way. And then after a big accident by Peter, he crashes his bike and gets into a couple of fights here and there. Mrs. Minslow sees David tending to Peter's injuries and gets the wrong idea, as nothing was happening. And then Peter's father is not too happy to hear about it. And it's just kind of like painting David in this wrong light. And it's, in all honesty, a big misunderstanding. But I think it's a lot of homophobia on the father's part for sure, but I think it's a lot of coming of age, which is what we're going to touch upon in the tropes. So when I was reading this, I very much was getting like Catcher in the Rye vibes from it the entire time. I don't know why when I was like reading this like first two chapters, I'm like, this reminds me of like Holden Caulfield's like kind of self-narrating style, because it's very written from all of Peter's perspective. It's his story, it's his title, it's his book, but it's him trying to come to grips with the fact that he may not be who he thought he was, in terms of finding out that he is, his first love that he is stating is towards David, that he's got a big old crush on David, and that's not normal. He didn't think he was like that. And what does that mean, coming to terms with, feeling that you're gay when you thought you were straight? So it's just trying to like navigate the like growing up era of like navigating his crush on David, but also his friend Tony, who's obsessed with girls and setting him up with dates, like getting like pressed up against, I think it was either Sophie or Gloria, but just things like that of how does that work? So it's definitely a coming of age story. It's again a short read for what it was, but I enjoyed it. And it's nice because at the end, like, Peter and David are able to reconcile their not differences, but like reconcile over the fact that Peter kind of didn't stick up for David that much. He tried, but it didn't really work, and that Peter and David was like kind of being labeled this thing which he wasn't. Because like nothing happened between the two. Nothing has happened or probably will happen. But at the end, Peter was like, I can see myself in maybe 5 or 6 years. Let me read it. Let me read the ending. Yeah. So after like fixing up the stuff or asking if he could take a look at the bike, he says, or Peter thinks, and maybe one day, in a couple of years of time, if I still felt the same about him, I'll turn up on his doorstep again. Meanwhile, I had a bike to fix. So it's like he's thinking like in the future, like maybe this is not just a temporary thing. Maybe this is a permanent thing. Like maybe this is who I am. And he's like, well, maybe in a couple years, if I, am still like head over heels for David, maybe I'll knock on his door again, like maybe I'll see where this can go. So it's interesting to read it from like, it's almost like Call Me By Your Name, but like not Call Me By Your Name in a way. But it's an emotional read. It's complicated. It's funny. It's profoundly, caring. It's a lot of heart in this book, and I really enjoy it. So how would I rank this? It's not a traditional MM romance, like I thought it was, but let's just go through it. So for the plot, characters, writing style, and spicy scenes, a lot of these things are going to be kind of mid. I think spicy scenes, I just gave it 3 stars because like nothing ever happens, but I didn't want to give it a 1 star because that means it would be bad. So for the plot, I gave it a 4 star. I think it's, like I said, a nice coming of age story. It reminds me a lot of like Catcher in the Rye by Holden Caulfield. Not Holden Caulfield, but whoever wrote like Holden Caulfield's journey in Catcher in the Rye. That's where it kind of got like drew me. The characters, I think, are where the book shines. I got a real sense of who Peter was, what his interests were as a character. The side characters kind of fell off. Like Sophie and Gloria are kind of like interchangeable to my mind. Tony, the best friend, is kind of a dick, but like it's realistic. Also, this is set in Europe, like England, and so they use a lot of like English vernacular that I just went over my head. So keep that in mind, which is why I'm touching about it on the writing style, because I enjoyed it. It was great. I can obviously understand the references, but some of the things I was just like, I don't understand like what's happening in terms of like the stuff they mentioned and things like that. But it's good. It's really well written. Again, the English vernacular might throw me for a loop, but it might not do anything to you. And then the spicy scenes, there's none. But I just was like, I'm not going to give it a 1 star. I don't want to bring down the ranking because there's nothing, because I didn't know what to expect. But overall, I'd give this a 4 star. I quite enjoyed it for what it was. It was a decent read. Like I said, it's a coming of age story that reminds me a lot of Catcher in the Rye, and I loved Catcher in the Rye when I read it in high school. I really felt like I was Holden Caulfield, even though I had the life that was not Holden Caulfield's life. But yeah, so the one thing I can't do is I can't recommend anything for this because I have not read anything like this besides Catcher in the Rye. So if you want, imagine there's a Catcher in the Rye photo here, because there's nothing after this. I don't know how else to describe this. I really don't. Catcher in the Rye is the only thing I have to kind of relate to this. It's a good read. I think it's a standalone coming-of-age story. I really, really enjoyed it. It's fairly short. I read it in like maybe an hour. It's like 230 pages or so, and it's enjoyable. I quite liked it. There's not much else for me to say about it. It's short and sweet and to the point, So again, thank you so much, Potato Kingdom, as my patron shout out. I appreciate your support, my friend. Having you here month over month just makes me feel like I'm doing something, good. And I appreciate your support and you believing in my little dream here of making this thing a full-time gig, if I can. But for those of you who want to find me on other things, you can always find me on Twitch. I stream nightly, playing a different game every night. Right now, we're doing things like Final Fantasy X on Fridays and Wild Arms on Saturdays. And we're starting Digimon World Next Order on Monday, so if you feel like any of those are interest to you, feel free to come by, hang out if you will. I also have a Twitter. You can find my unhinged thoughts there. You can see me post schedules and kind of just retweet a lot of not safe for work things, if you will. And then also Patreon, like I mentioned earlier. If you want to support me, feel free, but there's no pressure. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little bit on the shorter side, but this is also a lot shorter of a book. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for watching. Do all those YouTube-y things like comment and subscribe. Surprise me with a subscribe, if you will. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.